On Christmas morning, my parents handed my sister a tiny velvet box. When she opened it, a silver house key sparkled in her palm. "Haley, it's yours." Dad beamed. "We bought you a house in Cambridge." My heart pounded. I stood there, holding a cup of coffee that suddenly felt ice cold. Why her? Why now? Mom glanced at me with that soft, pitying smile. "Emily, someday you'll understand." I forced a smile, but inside a storm was brewing. Was I not good enough? Didn't they love me the same? Or was there something darker behind all this generosity? That night I lay awake, questions twisting in my gut. Why did they trust me to keep their secrets all these years? And what would happen if I finally stopped protecting them? On Christmas morning, my world changed forever. I still remember the warm scent of cinnamon rolls, the soft twinkle of fairy lights on our Boston porch, and my mom's cheery voice humming carols in the kitchen. Everything felt perfect, or so I thought. Then I saw my parents' eyes, gleaming with a secret excitement. They called my younger sister, Haley, over to the tree. Mom reached behind a giant golden bough and pulled out a small velvet box. I smiled, thinking it was jewelry, but when Haley opened it, it was a shiny silver house key. "Congratulations, baby." Dad beamed. "We bought you a house. Right here in Cambridge. You're only 24 and already a homeowner. We're so proud of you." Haley squealed and threw her arms around them. Tears spilled down her cheeks. My parents wiped them away like she was their delicate little princess. And me? I stood there frozen, my hands awkwardly clutching a coffee mug. My heart tried so hard not to crack. I tried to swallow it all down. Maybe they'd explain later. Maybe there was something for me too. Then Dad reached under the tree, pulled out a medium-sized box and grinned at me. "Emily, sweetheart, this is yours." My stomach fluttered. Hope, foolish, desperate hope, lit up inside me. I carefully unwrapped the box, lifted the lid, and stared at a stack of plain kitchen towels and a handwritten note. "New linens for your apartment. Merry Christmas." I forced a smile. "Thanks. Really thoughtful." But my voice wavered. My eyes stung. I didn't want to ruin Haley's moment, so I stepped back, letting them fuss over her. I hid my shaking hands by folding the towels over and over. Then Dad did something that still haunts me. He picked up my gift, the silly linens he'd given me, and tried to laugh it off. "Well, Emily's always been so independent. You understand why we did this for Haley, right? Someday you'll see it was the right choice." Haley giggled, hugging me. "Yeah, you've always been the tough one." Something inside me broke. I wasn't sure if it was my pride, my love for them, or just my heart finally giving up. The rest of the day blurred. I smiled through dinner, helped clean up, pretended not to notice the way they kept talking about Haley's new neighborhood, new kitchen, new possibilities. That night I lay awake in my tiny apartment across town, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how it was possible to be so loved, and yet so overlooked. I told myself to let it go. They didn't mean harm. They just saw Haley differently. But the pain settled deep in my chest, building a quiet fury. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. Because a month later, my parents asked me to do something that would ignite every spark of resentment I'd ever buried. A month after that Christmas, I got a call from my mom while I was on my lunch break in downtown Boston. She sounded unusually sweet, almost syrupy. "Emily, honey, we were wondering if you could help Haley out with something." I closed my eyes, took a slow breath. "Sure. What's up?" "Well, she's moving into the house this weekend, but you know how she is, not great with money yet. Could you co-sign her home insurance and utilities for a few months? Just until she settles in." My grip on my phone tightened so hard my knuckles went white. So they bought her a house, and now they wanted me to shoulder the responsibility if she couldn't pay her bills? But I heard my dad's voice in the background urging, "It's family, Emily. Be the bigger sister." I swallowed every bit of pride left in me and agreed. Because that's what I'd always done. Played the responsible, dependable daughter. The one who never complained. The one who was so independent she didn't need help. But inside I started keeping score. And the debt was growing. A few weeks later, I visited Haley's new place. It was stunning. An old brick colonial with a sprawling garden. Sunlight poured through French windows. Hardwood floors glowed under fresh polish. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Isn't it cute? Haley beamed, twirling around in the kitchen. I was thinking of having a big housewarming. You'll come early and help set up, right? Of course I would. Because even though I wanted to run, I still loved my sister. I wanted to be happy for her. I wanted to be part of this family. So I spent hours hanging string lights in the backyard, arranging cheese platters, scrubbing wine glasses. All while Haley flitted about, taking selfies for Instagram and tagging. #blessed, #homeowner, #dreams come true. When the guests arrived, I hid in the kitchen. I couldn't stand hearing everyone gush. Haley, you're so lucky. Your parents must adore you. At one point, I caught Dad's proud smile across the room. He was showing off the deed papers to his golf buddies, bragging about setting Haley up for life. Meanwhile, I was still drowning in student debt, paying off my own small apartment, and now partially responsible if Haley ever defaulted. The unfairness clawed at me, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. That night, after everyone left, I found Haley out on the porch with two of her friends. They were giggling over some texts. As I walked up, I heard her say, "Ugh, Emily's like a second mom. You know? So serious. So small. I'd die if I had her life. I mean, good thing I'm the pretty one." They burst into laughter. Something inside me snapped so violently I thought I might actually faint. But instead of confronting her, I just walked back to my car, every step numb. I drove home shaking, staring at the road through hot tears. That was the moment the shift happened. I realized love wasn't enough. Loyalty wasn't enough. They didn't see me. Not really. Not as an equal or even as someone to respect. And I decided that night, if they weren't going to value me, I'd stop protecting them from themselves. Because my family had one dirty little secret they'd always trusted me to keep. A secret that could unravel everything. And suddenly I was done being their shield. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with betrayal, anger, and something else, pure focused resolve. Because my parents' money, the money they used to buy Haley that beautiful house, it wasn't exactly clean. Years ago, when I was in college, I accidentally discovered that my dad was running an elaborate tax avoidance scheme through his construction business. It wasn't outright fraud, but it was shady. Hidden offshore accounts, underreported profits. Enough that if it ever came to light, the IRS would tear them apart. Dad had sworn me to secrecy back then. Made it seem like he was doing it for all of us. For family security. And I'd believed him. Or at least I'd convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But now I saw it all clearly. They weren't protecting the family. They were protecting Haley's comfort, their own pride, and using me as their moral alibi. I spent the next few days going through old files on my laptop. Copies of spreadsheets, emails Dad had once asked me to help clean up when I was interning at his office. I hadn't even realized at the time how damning they were. Then I made a discreet call to a former professor of mine, who now worked with the IRS's forensic accounting team. I didn't give my name. I just asked hypothetical questions, hinted about someone close to me hiding large sums offshore. He told me enough to know exactly how vulnerable my family really was. That Saturday, we all met at Haley's house again. Another party, this time a small family brunch. I watched them laugh over mimosas, Haley draped across Mom's shoulder like a pampered cat. At one point, Dad clinked his glass. "Can we just take a minute to appreciate how lucky we all are? To have each other, to have this beautiful new chapter for Haley." He glanced at me, expecting a dutiful smile. Instead, I folded my napkin carefully and said, "Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about. All of you." The room went silent. Even Haley straightened up, confused. I looked at Dad. "Remember those records you had me clean up in college? I still have them. Every transaction. Every wire to the Cayman Islands." His face drained of color so fast I thought he might pass out. "Emily," he hissed, panic rising. "That was private." "No," I cut him off. "It was illegal. And you used it to buy this house for Haley while telling me to be proud of being independent. Meanwhile, you've made me co-sign on her bills. So I'd be just as tied up in your mess if it ever came out." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Haley's eyes darted between us, horrified. "You wouldn't," Dad started, his voice cracking. "Emily, we're your family." "I was your family," I said. "But family doesn't treat each other like insurance policies." Or emotional garbage cans. Then I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out. I didn't even slam the door. I didn't have to. The silence behind me was punishment enough. 2 days later, Dad called me. His voice was shaking. "Emily, please, we can fix this. I'll put a house in your name too. I'll clear your loans. Whatever you want." It almost broke me hearing him beg. But I'd spent my entire life wanting them to see my worth, and they never would unless it cost them something real. I said quietly, "I'm done protecting you. Do what you have to do. I'll do the same." Then I hung up. That night, I sent a neat little package of documents, copies only for now, to the IRS tip line. With a simple note, "I believe these may indicate unreported offshore income tied to Boston-based contracting projects. Happy to cooperate if needed." And I slept better than I had in years. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. A month later, I was walking out of my office in downtown Boston when I saw 2 federal vehicles parked outside my parents' house on the local evening news. Agents were carting out boxes of files. The anchor's voice was grave, talking about an extensive investigation into offshore tax shelters and fraudulent accounting by Bennett Contracting. My stomach twisted. Even though I'd started this, it was surreal seeing it play out on TV. I knew Haley was inside. Knew she was probably sobbing, terrified that the dream life she'd been handed would slip through her fingers. And part of me still ached for her. For the sister I used to build pillow forts with. But she'd made her choices. Just like our parents had. The next day my phone rang nonstop. My parents, Haley, even old family friends, all begging me to tell the authorities there was a mistake. That it was just a misunderstanding. I didn't answer. Because there was no misunderstanding. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for putting myself first. It took almost a year for everything to wind through the courts. Dad ended up with a massive fine, and narrowly avoided jail with a suspended sentence because he cooperated. The company was sold off to cover debts. My parents had to move into a modest rental outside Worcester. The fancy lifestyle evaporated overnight. As for Haley, she had to sell her beautiful Cambridge house. She sent me a bitter text once. "Hope you're happy. You ruined everything." I didn't reply. Because what I'd ruined wasn't a family, it was an illusion. And sometimes illusions have to die so truth can breathe. Meanwhile, my life strangely beautifully started to bloom. I threw myself into my work. I finally took that transfer to Chicago I'd been hesitant about. And with the raise and bonus, I paid off my student loans in a year. Bought a cozy loft downtown that was all mine. No one else's strings attached. I even met someone. Daniel. Kind, funny, patient. When I finally told him about my family, he didn't flinch. Just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You deserve so much better than the way they treated you." The following Christmas, I stood by my own tiny tree, stringing up lights with Daniel. He handed me a mug of spice cider and pulled me into a slow dance right there in the living room. For the first time in forever, I felt safe. Loved. Seen not for what I could sacrifice or shoulder, but for who I was. And you know something? I don't hate my family. I hope someday Haley finds her own way to grow up. I hope my parents learn what real love looks like. Love that doesn't hinge on manipulation or golden children. But I also know that whether they ever do or not, I'll be okay. Because I finally chose myself. And that was the greatest gift of all. Soft laugh, deep breath. Funny how it all started with a house key. Turns out I didn't need them to hand me one. I found the door to my own life, and this time I'm the only one holding the key.